Snow was falling heavy that night when two little girls in pink dresses were dragged into the yard, their thin arms trembling as icy water was poured over their heads. Neighbors turned away, doors slammed shut, and the twins clutched each other in silence until a deep bark cut through the storm. A German shepherd stood at the gate, teeth bared, refusing to look away. Behind him came a man in uniform, Officer Silas Monroe, who froze at the sight. In that instant, past and present collided, and he knew. This was not just cruelty. It was the beginning of a battle where truth, love, and justice would rise against the darkest betrayal. The night had fallen heavy on Denver, Colorado, shrouding the city beneath a relentless storm of snow. Each flake drifted slowly at first, graceful as ash in the air, before being swept sideways by the bitter mountain wind. The streets lay half deserted, the lamplight blurred and haloed in the swirling white, and the world carried the silence of winter broken only by the groan of old wood and the distant wail of a siren. Against this backdrop stood a house once proud 3 stories of brick and stone, with black iron gates now half buried under snowdrifts. Inside, a wake had ended only hours before. A wealthy man had been buried, leaving behind an inheritance not only of money, but of power. And where there is power, there is always hunger to seize it. The front door banged open with the force of a storm itself. A woman appeared in the doorway, her shoulders sharp beneath a fur coat, her eyes narrow and glittering. This was Candace Whitmore Collins, 35, once admired for her beauty in social circles but known among those closest as a woman whose ambition burned hotter than her compassion. When she had married Richard Collins 2 years ago, she had slipped into the role of grieving widow with theatrical ease, a handkerchief always pressed to her eyes, a quiver always in her voice. Yet the moment she crossed the threshold tonight, the mask fell away. Her lips tightened into a thin blade. Her words hissed through clenched teeth as she gripped the wrists of the 2 little girls who stood beside her. The twins, Ellie and Rose Collins, were 6 years old and fragile, in a way that broke the heart to witness. Both wore faded pink dresses, garments chosen by their late father months ago, meant for a spring recital that never came. On this winter night, the dresses clung to their thin frames, too light for the biting cold. Ellie, the elder by 5 minutes, had wide blue eyes filled with the habit of watching the world carefully, as though she expected every shadow to reach out and strike. Rose, slightly smaller, had hair a shade darker, and though she trembled, her lips pressed together stubbornly, as if refusing to give their tormentors the satisfaction of hearing her cry. Their faces carried the softness of children untouched by time, but marked already by grief. Their mother lost in a car accident 3 years earlier. Their father lowered into the earth that very morning. Candace dragged them across the threshold with the cruelty of a farmer pulling sacks of grain. Behind her followed a tall man with an unkempt beard, shoulders hunched forward in a swagger that was both arrogance and neglect. His name was Victor Kane, 38, once a failed entrepreneur who drifted from scheme to scheme, now clinging to Candace like a parasite drawn to wealth. His eyes were bloodshot, the smell of whiskey trailing after him even as the snow thickened. He was not family by blood, but by choice. A cruel choice, Candace declared shamelessly the moment Richard's coffin was shut. The children stumbled as they were dragged into the yard. Their shoes slipped on the icy steps, their knees struck against the stone. Candace thrust them down into the snow, their dresses blooming out like pale flowers bruised underfoot. She seized a bucket standing by the steps, its water already chilling in the frost, and with a sneer spat, "You two carry nothing but bad luck. If you stay under this roof, misfortune will never leave. It's time to wash it away." Ellie whimpered, clutching Rose's hand as the bucket tipped. The icy water cascaded over them, soaking hair, fabric, skin until their small bodies convulsed with shivers. Rose gasped, the cold stealing her breath, while Ellie pressed her face into her sister's shoulder as if to shield her. The snow caught in their lashes, melted on their flushed cheeks, and turned the pink of their dresses translucent. They looked less like children than abandoned dolls left in the storm. Victor laughed, a harsh bark that echoed off the gates. "Look at them," he muttered. "2 little curses dressed for pity. No one will take them in. Best they learn now they are nothing." He ground his heel into the snow near their feet, close enough to make Ellie flinch, then reached down as though to seize the teddy bear Rose still clutched. A toy worn, stitched at the seams, fur gone gray with years of comfort. Candace stopped him, not out of mercy but calculation. "Let them keep it," she said coldly. "It will be the last kindness they ever mistake for love." The yard grew silent except for the ragged breathing of the twins, and in that silence the cruelty of their abandonment seemed to echo louder than any scream. The neighbors saw. A curtain shifted across the street, a porch light flickered on, but the weight of silence crushed all courage. One by one the lights blinked off, doors shut tighter, and the world looked away. Yet not all eyes turned aside. From down the street came the crunch of tires against packed snow, the low hum of an engine fighting the cold. A police SUV rolled slowly into view, headlights cutting pale tunnels through the storm. Inside sat Officer Silas Monroe, 40 years old, a man whose broad frame filled the driver's seat, but whose eyes carried a weariness beyond his years. His short-cropped, dark hair was peppered at the edges with gray, his face weathered not by age but by grief. Only 6 months earlier, cancer had taken his wife, leaving him alone in an apartment that felt emptier each night. Since then, he had volunteered for extra patrols, anything to keep from hearing the silence when he returned home. Beside him in the passenger seat sat Valor, his German Shepherd partner, 5 years old, black and tan fur gleaming even under the dim lights. Valor was more than a canine unit. He was Silas's shadow, his solace, and often his voice when silence pressed too heavy. Trained as both protector and comfort animal, Valor had a way of sensing pain long before it was spoken. His ears twitched as the SUV slowed, his nose pressed to the glass, and then his body stiffened. A growl rumbled low in his chest before bursting into a bark so sharp it cut through the wind. Silas followed his gaze. There, under the cruel glow of the porch light, 2 children huddled in snow, their dresses clinging wetly to their skin, their arms wrapped around each other. A woman stood over them, empty bucket in hand, her laughter lost in the storm. A man lounged nearby, smoke curling from his lips, watching as if it were sport. For one frozen instant, Silas could not breathe. The memory slammed back with the force of a blow, he himself at 8 years old, standing barefoot on a porch while his stepfather screamed, rain pouring down, his small body shaking as his mother turned her back. He had thought time had buried that memory, but the sight of Ellie and Rose brought it roaring back. He pulled the SUV to the curb so sharply the tires skidded on ice. The engine's roar cut off, and silence fell except for Valor's furious barking. The dog leapt against the door, teeth bared, his entire body taut with fury. Silas stepped out into the storm, snow slicing at his face. He straightened to his full height, shoulders squared beneath the dark police jacket, badge glinting under the streetlight. His breath billowed white into the night as he strode toward the gate, boots crunching the snow with a rhythm that promised reckoning. The children looked up at the sound of footsteps. Ellie's eyes widened, terror and hope warring within them. Rose clutched the teddy bear tighter, her lips trembling. For the first time since their ordeal began, a spark flickered in their gaze. Not yet trust, but the faintest recognition that perhaps someone had come who would not turn away. Silas reached the gate, his gloved hand resting briefly on the iron bars. Valor pressed against the fence, barking with the force of a sentinel that would not yield. Silas's eyes, dark and burning, fixed on the figures before him. His voice when it came was low but carried the weight of thunder. "What in God's name are you doing to these children?" And in that moment, under the falling snow, the battle lines were drawn, the cruelty of greed on one side, the desperate innocence of 2 little girls on the other, and in between a man and his dog who had once been broken but who now felt his purpose reignite. Silas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The gate swung open, and Valor pressed forward, body rigid, barking once with authority. Candace's sneer faltered. Victor shifted, shoulders tense, but stayed back. Silas removed his jacket and draped it over the shivering twins, covering both under the shield of his badge. "Step away," he said evenly, thumb pressing his radio. "Dispatch Officer Monroe. 2 minors at risk, 1180 Worthington. Request CPS notification. The calm female voice on the other end confirmed. Procedure spoken aloud became law. Victor muttered about rights. Candace hissed, "You'll regret this." Silas ignored them. He lifted Ellie and Rose into his arms, Valor pacing beside them like a sentinel. Soon the SUV's heater blew warmth, and Valor's big head rested between the seats. The girls pressed closer to him, small bodies thawing. Rose whispered, "Can your dog stay with us?" "He already is," Silas answered. Downtown Denver glowed pale under falling snow. Silas parked beneath his building, low-high terrace, a brick mid-rise that smelled faintly of old radiators. Marisol Vega, the night receptionist, 52, Mexican-American, with tired but kind eyes, looked up from her crossword. She saw the children, saw the officer's face, and asked no questions. "Blankets, towels, cocoa," she said, already moving. She returned with armfuls, touched Ellie's shoulder softly. "Mi cielo, you're safe now." The elevator hummed. Upstairs, Silas unlocked a modest apartment. Gray couch, bare shelves, a photo of his late wife smiling into the wind. He set the girls down, gave them towels and oversized shirts, then dried their hair with a noisy old dryer. Steam fogged the bathroom mirror. Their reflections looked less like victims, more like children again. He set cocoa on the counter. Ellie drank cautiously. Rose clung to her ragged teddy bear. When Silas asked gently to see the toy, Rose hesitated but nodded. Turning it in his hands, he felt weight beneath the stuffing. Valor's ears pricked, a soft growl of recognition. Silas slid his pocket knife under a seam. Old cotton spilled out, and from within he drew a small silver USB drive. Rose whispered, almost reverent, "It's Dad's." "He said the bear keeps secrets," Ellie added softly. "Before he got sick, he told me, if the house ever feels colder with people in it than when it's empty, hold the bear. The right person will know how to listen." Silas's chest tightened. He set the USB on his laptop, the screen glowing pale. One file appeared, only a date. He didn't open it yet. Training steadied his hands. He slipped the drive into an evidence bag, marked the time, photographed it, and placed it in his lockbox. "Whatever this is, you did nothing wrong," he told them. Ellie nodded solemnly. Rose whispered, "We're not bad luck?" "No," he said firmly. "You're the luck someone else didn't deserve." He made them tea with too much honey, found a spare toothbrush, and prepared the guest room with a lamp glowing warm. The twins curled under his jacket and fleece throw. Valor stretched before the door. Their breathing steadied. Rose clutched the bear, even with its seam taped. A shuffle sounded outside. Arthur Bell, 68, retired mail carrier with dark walnut skin and a baseball cap, paused by the hall. He'd lost a son years ago and knew grief by its weight. "Everything all right, officer?" "Getting there," Silas answered. "If you hear knocking tonight—" "I'll mind the hall," Arthur said simply, owing an old debt to a dog that once saved him. He moved on and the hall steadied. Later, with the apartment quiet, Silas checked the lockbox again. He scribbled for the record on a sticky note, his habit of leaving himself breadcrumbs. He looked at the girls sleeping under his jacket, at Valor guarding the doorway, and whispered a vow. "We don't fail them." Valor's tail thumped once, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, snow fell silent, covering the city in white, as if to bear witness. The apartment was quiet, save for the muted hum of the heater and the soft rhythm of snow tapping against the window. Silas sat at his desk, the small silver USB drive gleaming under the lamplight, sealed in its evidence bag. For hours he had resisted opening the file, letting procedure be his shield. But procedure alone did not warm two frightened girls sleeping in his guest room. He looked toward the closed door where Valor lay sprawled like a stone guardian, ears twitching at every shift of the night. Finally, Silas slipped the drive back into the laptop, exhaled and clicked. One file, a simple audio clip. He pressed play. Richard Collins' voice filled the room, weary but firm. "Candace, I don't need this. Every time I take it, my heart races. Victor, why are you insisting?" Then a pause, followed by Victor's low, steady tone. "Doctor prescribed it. Stop being paranoid." After another silence, Candace's whisper slid through. A serpent's hiss caught on microphone. Let him drink more. Let him die already. Silas closed his eyes, his fists tightening until the veins stood out like cables. When he opened them, his expression was carved from stone. He stopped the recording, saved a secure copy, then leaned back. He knew what this meant. A homicide investigation disguised as natural illness, perpetrators with wealth and connections, and two children as living targets in a game of inheritance. His gut had always told him danger was circling, but now danger had a voice. In the guest room, the children stirred. Valor, sensing restlessness, rose and padded softly inside. Ellie sat up in bed, hair tangled, eyes wide and wet from half-dreams. Rose whimpered, curling into herself. Without hesitation, Valor climbed onto the bed, his weight sinking into the mattress. He lay across the middle like a warm barrier, curling his body so each girl could lean against him. Ellie pressed her cheek into his fur, tears easing, while Rose's trembling slowed as her fingers found the steady rise and fall of his chest. Silas watched from the doorway, unseen, and realized the dog was already doing what no human could, stitching a shred of safety into the night. By dawn, Denver woke under a sky white with snowfall. News traveled faster than the plows. Candace had wasted no time. In the corner diner where truckers nursed coffee before long shifts, a flat screen played the morning broadcast. Candace appeared on camera, draped in black, crocodile tears streaking her flawless makeup. Her voice cracked just enough for sympathy. My stepdaughters were taken from me by a police officer who refuses to return them. He has no rights. No guardianship. He only wants control of my late husband's estate. Victor stood at her shoulder, playing the grieving brother-in-law. Across town, headlines spread on glowing phone screens. Police officer abducts Collins' heirs. Millionaire's widow pleads for justice. Reporters smelled blood in the snow. Back in the apartment, Silas poured coffee into a chipped mug and read the article on his phone with clenched jaw. He had expected this strike. Wealthy liars never fought with fists first. They fought with narratives, and public opinion was their weapon. He set the phone aside and called in. The line picked up. Detective Avery Torres. Torres, 45, Latina, with the precise diction of someone who had survived both prejudice and bureaucracy, had known Silas since his rookie years. She wore her curly hair cropped short and always carried a small silver cross tucked in her vest. People said she was born suspicious, but in truth she had earned her instincts from a career unraveling frauds and false alibis. Years earlier, she had worked a case involving Silas's late wife's stolen medical files, and the two had forged a mutual respect, his doggedness, her patience, and a shared disdain for corruption. It's Monroe, he said. I have evidence in the Collins case. Audio indicates premeditated poisoning. Two suspects, Candace Whitmore Collins, Victor Kane. I need a formal homicide file open. Torres exhaled. You know who you're up against. Candace has lawyers on retainer. Victor has debts tied to men who won't let him fall. If we move, they'll push back with media and politics. They already have, Silas replied, but we can't sit on this. Torres was quiet a moment. Bring me the file. We'll start the paper trail, but Silas, keep the kids out of sight. If they see them as obstacles, they'll escalate. He ended the call, gaze drifting to the closed door of the guest room. Valor padded out, tail brushing the floor, amber eyes meeting Silas's as if to remind him, we guard what matters. That afternoon, the smear campaign worsened. Paparazzi camped outside Low-High Terrace, cameras aimed at the building's entrance. Marisol Vega, at the desk, fielded calls from reporters pretending to be child services, her jaw tightening with each refusal. Officer Monroe lives here, she told one persistent voice, but you have the wrong number for your circus. She hung up, muttering a prayer in Spanish. Inside, the twins sat at Silas's table, sketching clumsy crayon pictures Marisol had slipped them. Rose drew Valor with a crown. Ellie drew a house with smoke curling from the chimney. Neither spoke about Candace. Children learn early which words summon monsters. When the doorbell buzzed, Silas checked the peephole and found Arthur Bell standing with 2 grocery bags. Brought cornbread, milk, and batteries, Arthur said when admitted. Storm like this, you never know when power cuts. The retired mail carrier set the bags down, nodded toward the children, and gave Valor a long scratch behind the ears. He's a fine one, Arthur said. Reminds me of a mutt I had in '72 who pulled me out of a flash flood. Never trusted my luck since then, only the dogs. Silas thanked him quietly. He understood. Neighbors like Arthur were witnesses of character, the kind who might later stand in court and say, I saw who cared, and I saw who didn't. Night came heavy. Snow fell thicker, muffling the city into silence. In the guest room, Valor climbed back onto the bed without invitation, curling between Ellie and Rose. Silas, sitting at the desk, wrote the opening lines of his report. On review of digital evidence, probable cause exists to investigate homicide in the death of Richard Collins. He paused, fingers hovering. He knew this report was more than words. It was the first step into a war where truth had to crawl uphill. He looked at Valor curled with the girls, their small breasts steady now, and he whispered, We'll hold the line. The storm that swept across Denver that morning felt like an omen. Snow drove sideways in sheets, muffling horns and footsteps, coating courthouse steps in treacherous white. But inside courtroom 6B, the air was hot with cameras, whispers, and the heavy expectation that truth would either rise or be buried deeper. Silas sat at the long wooden table, posture stiff, his police jacket buttoned to the throat. Beside him were Ellie and Rose, both dressed in borrowed wool coats that still looked too large for their small frames. Their hands clung to his, tiny fingers burrowing into his palms for safety. Under the table, Valor lay at their feet, ears flicking with every new sound, his amber eyes scanning the chamber. His mere presence calmed the girls, yet his tense body was a reminder of danger never far. Across the aisle sat Candace. She wore a tailored black dress with a strand of pearls, face pale and framed perfectly by curls, her makeup crafted to conjure tragedy. Victor leaned in beside her, broad shoulders ill-suited to his ill-fitting suit, his knuckles drumming on the table. At their side, attorney Martin Crane, 48, blonde hair slicked back, reputation for cutting witnesses apart with charm, leaned back in his chair, smirk fixed like armor. The judge entered. Patricia Coleman, 60, African-American, known for her stern voice and zero tolerance for theatrics. She had built her career as a prosecutor against organized crime before moving to the bench, and rumors said her gaze could still slice like a scalpel. She settled her robe, tapped her gavel once. Court is in session. We will hear the matter of guardianship and allegations of abuse concerning minors Ellie and Rose Collins. Candace immediately dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Crane rose, voice smooth. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of a grieving mother seeking to recover her children, abducted by an officer who acted beyond his authority. He gestured toward Silas with casual disdain. We are horrified that media slander has painted her as cruel when she has merely loved these girls as her own. Silas kept his jaw locked. Torres, seated behind him as legal witness for law enforcement, leaned forward, her low voice steady. Patience. Wait your turn. And then the first witness. Mrs. Evelyn Dawson, 72, lived across the street from the Collins home for decades, known in her neighborhood for keeping her hydrangeas immaculate even in winter. She walked slowly to the stand, body slight beneath her quilted coat, but her eyes were resolute. Widowhood and years of silence had given her a stoic endurance. I saw them, she said. Her voice cracked but did not break. That night after the funeral, Candace dragged the girls out into the snow. She poured water over them. Victor laughed. She folded her wrinkled hands. I turned away once before, years ago, when another child in another home was hurt. I swore I would not again. Crane pressed forward, voice dripping with charm. Mrs. Dawson, do you dislike my client? Perhaps envy her status? Evelyn shook her head. I envy no one who can pour ice on children. The quiet in the courtroom deepened. Next came Franklin O'Rourke, 55, a homeless man who often slept behind the Collins block. His beard was wild, his coat patched, his eyes gray and unflinching. Once he had been a machinist until layoffs, divorce, and drink stripped his life away. But now, standing in court, he carried himself with a dignity long buried. I heard crying, he said, peeked around the dumpster, saw Robert grip one girl's arm and Candace pour that water. The girl begged, small voice like a bird in winter. I didn't step in, because Victor looked at me, and I knew if I did, I'd be next. His hands trembled, but his voice steadied. I'm not proud, but I won't lie. Candace's painted mask faltered. Victor shifted, face taut with rage. Then Silas placed the evidence bag on the table. The USB gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Judge Coleman nodded. Proceed. Torres rose, pressing play on the laptop. Richard's voice filled the courtroom, weary, desperate. Candace, I don't need this medicine. Victor, why are you making me? Then Victor's cold reply, and Candace's whisper. Let him die already. The courtroom froze. Gasps broke the air. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Judge Coleman's face tightened, unreadable. Candace leapt to her feet. Lies! Edited! But her voice shook. Torres spoke firmly. File has been verified by digital forensic examiners. No signs of tampering. Then the second blow. A technician from the automotive manufacturer, Daniel Cho, 33, Korean-American, nervous but precise, was sworn in. Slim, bespectacled, his life revolved around engines and numbers more than crowds, but he had a moral streak carved from growing up translating bills for immigrant parents. He placed documents on the evidence table. Vehicle logs show override entries 1 week before Mrs. Collins's fatal crash. Not brakes, electronic control unit tampered with, direct access required. He raised his eyes briefly. Records also show the car in Victor Kane's possession at that time, logged by garage service. Silence again. Victor's face drained of color. He blurted, That's fake! His voice cracked like breaking ice, but Judge Coleman's gavel struck. Order! Through it all, Ellie and Rose sat pressed against Silas, clutching his hands. When Candace's lawyer leaned toward them, his voice oily, Little girls, do you really think your stepmother hated you? Or did Officer Monroe tell you what to say? Valor growled, low and primal, rising to his feet. His hackles bristled, his bark thundered once. The sound silenced the room. Even Crane recoiled, flustered. Coleman's sharp gaze swept over the chamber. Control your tone, counsel, and someone remove that grin from your face. You will not intimidate children in my courtroom. The final minutes moved quickly. Coleman's verdict was iron. Preliminary findings show strong evidence of abuse, poisoning, and fraud. Effective immediately. Emergency guardianship of minors, Ellie and Rose Collins, granted to Officer Silas Monroe. Mrs. Candace Collins and Mr. Victor Kane are remanded into custody pending further charges. 2 deputies stepped forward. Candace shrieked, pearls clattering, lunging as if to reach the girls. But Valor's snarl and the deputy's hands stopped her cold. Victor froze, stone pale before the cuffs closed around his wrists. Cameras flashed. Ellie buried her face in Silas's side. Rose whispered, Are we safe now? Silas bent low, voice steady, fierce. Yes, you are safe. As the gavel struck again, outside the blizzard raged, but inside courtroom 6B, justice had broken through the storm. The snow had finally eased by the time Silas walked the twins out of the courthouse. The wind still cut, sharp and unrelenting, but the air felt lighter, cleansed by the sound of the gavel that had ended Candace and Victor's reign. Ellie and Rose clung to his hands as if they were lifelines. Cameras flashed on the steps. Reporters shouted questions, but Silas ignored them all. Valor trotted close, head held high, his steady gait forcing a respectful circle of space around them. For the first time in days, Silas felt the ground beneath him firm. The emergency guardianship papers were still warm in his coat pocket when he made a choice. He would not take the girls back to his cramped apartment, nor leave them to live in the shadow of trauma. Instead, he would give them a place where their father's love was still alive, and where other children lost in winter might find warmth. That night, Silas drove to the old Collins house, once a fortress of wealth, then a stage for cruelty. Snow weighed heavy on its roof, windows dark, but in his mind he saw its walls filled with laughter again. He stood in the yard with Valor, Ellie, and Rose at his side. This house won't hold shadows anymore, he said quietly. The girls looked up at him, uncertain. It will be a beginning, he promised. The following week became a labor of transformation. Neighbors who had once looked away now stepped forward. Dorothy Mendoza, a retired seamstress in her late 60s with silver-streaked hair and calloused hands, arrived with bolts of fabric. She had once raised 5 children alone after her husband's accident, and hardship had carved into her a fierce compassion. "Every window needs color," she declared, measuring curtains while Ellie and Rose watched, giggling when she pretended to scold her own tape measure. Franklin O'Rourke, the homeless witness, showed up with tools borrowed from a shelter. Though his beard was wild and his jacket frayed, there was purpose in his eyes for the first time in years. He hammered shelves together, his rough fingers steadying boards with care. "Street skills still count," he told Rose, handing her a nail to hold. She smiled, pride glinting in her eyes. Linda Johnson, owner of a corner cafe, 60, plump and strong-voiced, carried trays of hot soup and sandwiches. "No one heals on an empty stomach," she said, setting bowls before children who had already begun to gather out of curiosity. She had buried a son lost to addiction, and her grief had taught her that feeding others was her rebellion against despair. Emily Carter, the young librarian, came with boxes of books and stacks of colored paper. 27, tall and soft-spoken, she had grown up shy in a family that never understood her love of stories. Now she bent to the children's level, guiding Ellie and Rose as they labeled bookshelves. "This is your reading room," she said. Even Detective Torres stopped by in plain clothes, her silver cross glinting. She reviewed papers with Silas at the dining table, reminding him to follow every legal step. "You've turned a house into evidence of love," she said quietly, though her eyes softened when Valor leaned his heavy head on her lap. The house glowed brighter with each passing day. Fairy lights strung across windows, walls painted fresh colors, laughter replacing echoes of cruelty. One afternoon, Ellie and Rose presented Valor with a gift. 2 pink scarves they had knitted together, uneven stitches, but strong. They wrapped one around his thick neck, the fabric bright against his dark fur. Valor stood proudly in the snow-dusted yard, scarf fluttering, like a living lantern before the door. On Christmas Eve, the house was alive with warmth. The dining table groaned under trays of food Linda had prepared. Children from the block crowded in, some shy, some hungry, all astonished by the welcome. Franklin showed them how to fold paper stars. Dorothy tied ribbons on curtains. Emily read aloud near the fire, her voice carrying through the rooms. The girls moved among them, cheeks flushed with joy. Silas stood by the window, watching snow fall soft against the glass. Ellie tugged his sleeve. "Dad," she said, the words shy but certain. "Look what we made." Rose echoed softly. "Dad." The words struck Silas's chest with a force stronger than any verdict. His throat tightened. He bent, drawing both into his arms. "I hear you," he whispered. Later, as the night grew quiet, Silas led the girls to the porch. Valor sat at the top step, scarf bright against the snow, his amber eyes shining like a beacon. Lights glowed from the windows behind them. Voices rose in song, and for a moment the house seemed to breathe. Silas crouched between the twins, his voice low, meant only for them. "Your father trusted the truth to survive. Tonight it does. He lives in this light." Ellie pressed her cheek against his shoulder. Rose tucked her hand into his. Valor, ever watchful, lifted his head and let out a low bark that echoed against the snowy street, as though announcing to the night that no darkness would enter here again. And so, the Collins house was reborn, not as a monument to wealth, but as a lantern in winter, for every child who needed shelter, and for 2 little girls who finally found the word Dad. As the snow settles and the lights of the winter center glow warm against the night, we are reminded of one simple truth. Even in the coldest storms, love can build a shelter. Justice may come late, but when it arrives, it brings hope not only for the innocent, but for every heart watching. If this story touched you, tell us in the comments what you believe is the true meaning of family. Your words might be the comfort someone else needs today. And if you want to hear more stories of courage, love, and redemption, please like this video and follow our channel so you never miss the next chapter.